Was Amelia Earhart eaten by giant crabs after living like a castaway when her plane crashed on a deserted island? Because recent evidence points to yes.
So a small group of historic aircraft hunters actually traveled to Gardner Island, which is like in the middle of nowhere, Pacific Ocean, where Earhart probably crashed. And this island is known for giant 8-pound tree climbing creepy coconut crabs.
Yeah, these crabs are bigger than a notebook, and they literally eat seagulls. They're also known for cleaning carcasses, like when an animal dies. So if Earhart did crash and ultimately die there, as this group thinks, the crabs could hold the secret to what happened to her remains.
Which would be crazy because that is the mystery that has everyone so obsessed with like what happened to Amelia Earhart. It's like what happened to her remains after she disappeared.
So in case you're not up to date on your elementary history class, we will refresh you. Amelia Earhart was one of the pioneer pilots, not just for women, but for everyone. Yes, she was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, but she was also the first person to fly from Hawaii to California and California to Mexico and many more.
And that's a huge deal because she made all those expeditions in the 1930s. So like women had just gotten the right to vote. And so their roles in society were so limited. So she was ahead of her time and encouraged women to reject social norms and pursue actual careers. Besides having her aviation career, she also launched a functional clothing line for women who live actively.
She seriously lived the American dream until it became a nightmare. In 1937, Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, set out to fly around the world. And the trip was supposed to take a month, covering 29,000 miles, and they made it 3/4 of the way through when
they departed from New Guinea heading to Howland Island, which was 2,600 miles away. And the flight was expected to be pretty rough, especially since they were supposed to land on this like tiny coral area that was really hard to locate.
Late in the journey, Earhart radioed that the plane was running out of fuel and that she was flying north and south on the longitude of the island to look for it. But that was the last transmission ever received from her.
And the world became obsessed with her like crash and disappearance. There's just so many wild theories about what happened to her. So this one that we came across is called the Irene Bolam hypothesis, and it's weirdly very popular. In it, Earhart was captured by the Japanese, and instead of like executing her, she was repatriated back to the US with the help of FDR. And then she lived out the rest of her life in secret under a pseudonym as a banker in New Jersey.
I'm just going to say that one sounds far-fetched. More probably, a lot of experts think Earhart's plane crashed in the Pacific Ocean, so she and her navigator drowned. But other experts, like the group that we mentioned before with the crabs, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, believe that they crashed on a different island when they couldn't locate Howland.
So we're speaking to the executive director of the group, Richard Gillespie, to learn about his expeditions to Gardner Island, exactly what he thinks happened to Earhart, and of course, we have to ask about the crabs.
Can you kind of lay the foundation? What exactly do you and your team think happened to Amelia Earhart?
We consider the mystery to be solved. It's not a theory. It is established fact. Here's what the evidence shows. Upon failing to find Howland Island, the island she was trying to get to, she quite unintentionally came across another island. It was obviously not Howland, but she was low on fuel, facing the prospect of a ditching in the ocean and almost certain death. And lo and behold, this island had a reef that surrounds it that dried at low tide. She's looking down and it looks like a runway. So she chose wisely, put down the wheels, put down the flaps, and make a landing. And it was a successful landing. And once she shut down, she could get out of the airplane. But she did have a problem. She didn't know what island it was. Now, her navigator, Fred Noonan, could figure out where they were in the sense of latitude, longitude, which was a little over 4 degrees south of the equator. The problem was the map she was using ended at 2.5 degrees south of the equator. They had flown off their map. So she's on this island, obviously uninhabited, and she starts sending radio distress calls. And these calls are heard by the Coast Guard. They're logging the times, but they can't make out what she's saying. Meanwhile, other people are hearing these calls, including people in the US and Canada, start hearing these signals. There's not many of them. There's a total of about 9 that we know about. And they stumble upon the right frequency, and suddenly they're hearing Amelia Earhart call for help very clearly. And they're astonished. And they say, somebody's got to know about this. And call their local newspaper. And the newspapers run articles about it. In one very famous case, a 15-year-old girl in St. Petersburg, Florida, her name was Betty Clank, is sitting in front of her radio, cruises the dial, like she often does, and she stumbles upon a harmonic and starts hearing Earhart. And she starts transcribing what she's hearing. And this goes on for an hour and three quarters.
Whoa.
And her father comes home from work. We got to get this information to the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard says, yeah, we know. We're getting a lot of reports of this. We're on top of it. So
Wow.
we have the notebook.
Wow.
And it's been verified. There's information there that Betty couldn't know was accurate. For example, Earhart is desperately trying to tell people where she is, but she doesn't know the name of the island. But there's something unique about this island. There's a big old shipwreck just down the reef a ways. SS Norwich City. It's a British freighter that went aground in 1929, but it's Norwich City. Betty writes down NY, or something that sounds like New York City. 3 months after she disappears, the British, who own the island, send an expedition there. They're not looking for Amelia. They want to check out the island as a future colony. There's a cadet officer who takes a whole bunch of pictures of the island. One of the pictures he took shows something on the reef that shouldn't be there, a dark spot. We gave that image to our forensic imaging specialist. Bottom line is, we're looking at the wreckage of a Lockheed Electra landing gear, one of the main landing gear. So we had good relationships with the U.S. State Department, Hillary Clinton State Department. We think you've got this nailed, and we want you to do your expedition this year. The Secretary of State is going to hold an event in the Benjamin Franklin Room, and I'm going to get up there and make my spiel, and we're going to bring in Bob Ballard, the guy who allegedly found the Titanic, and he's going to talk about it. And on March 20th, 2012, that's what we did.
Now, some of you may know that when I was a little girl growing up in Illinois, I was interested in all kinds of stories about women. And my mother was a real fan of Amelia Earhart's and actually told me about Amelia Earhart.
How long do you think they lived as castaways? We found the site where she died on the island and the remains of the campfire. There are burned fish bones, turtle bones, bird bones. Her partial skeleton was found in 1940.
I mean, we also saw that your team is the first to connect giant crabs, like giant coconut crabs that were on the island, to her remains. So can you kind of tell us about this theory and these crabs? Because we hear they're like giant and crazy.
Yeah, they're called robber crab because they steal things. These crabs, they're the world's largest land crab. They can climb a coconut tree, snip down the nuts, climb back down, pull the husk off the nut, and get into the nut and eat the coconut.
That's crazy.
They're awesome creatures. They are not aggressive at all. And they're kind of shy. They may have played a role in carrying off some of the bones after Earhart was dead.
The last question we wanted to ask you is like, what about Amelia Earhart's mystery keeps you coming back? Like, why? What really spoke to you about it?
From a historical perspective, it really doesn't matter much what happened to Amelia Earhart. What we do is educational. That's our purpose. We want to explore, demonstrate, and teach how you go about figuring out what's true. And that's something that's needed now more than ever.